Hey everyone, and welcome to my Photoshop tutorial for artists. My name's Kate and I'm going to be taking you through everything I've learned over the years. This is going to be an introduction to Photoshop, so if you've never opened it before I'll take you through all the basics, but I am going to take you all the way up to being able to start sketching, so even if you have used Photoshop before you may still learn something. I may work fast at times, so you may need to pause and rewind, but there's more information in the description below. If there is something you want me to elaborate on, just drop a comment below as well. I'm using a Windows PC, so any shortcuts I mentioned are going to be Windows based, but I will show the Mac equivalent on the screen. If I don't show one, then it's the same in both systems. I'm using a pen display, but I'm also using a mouse, so I will let you know if certain features in Photoshop work better with a mouse or a pen. And I'm using Adobe Photoshop CC 2017. So let's get started. When you start up Photoshop, this is the screen you're going to see. You're going to have your recent files, you're going to have CC files, which is the Creative Cloud, and you've got the option to open a new file or open a file on your computer. I've got a whole load in my recents, but I'm just going to open a new one. When you open a new file, this is the screen you'll see, although you may not see all these in the main screen here. These are my recent items. You've also got the option across the top to have some standard layouts. In the photo you've got a couple of blank document presets here. You can view all by clicking this button here, and there's some templates that you can use which Photoshop gives to you. When you click on each one, it shows you all the details on the right here, so you can go through all the different types of templates available to you. In the Save tab, that's where there's some templates that I've created that I've saved. The way I did this was, let's say, art and illustration. I chose the 18 by 24 poster. That's 18 by 24 inches. I just changed that to pixels. It's in the portrait orientation. The resolution is at 300 pixels per inch. We're in the RGB color mode, 8-bit, and I changed the background color to be transparent, and we're using the working RGB sRGB color profile with square pixels. So I will go into some of this in greater detail in a future video, but for now you can just set up a document similar to this, and if you wanted to save it as your own preset, you just click on this button here and it will bring up this save document preset box, and you just give it a name and then you save the preset, and then you will be able to find it in your saved section. So I'm just going to choose that poster size one, and you click create and it will open it up. So this is what you see when you first open Photoshop. I'm just going to go up to the window menu and workspace and then reset essentials. And this is going to reset my workspace to the basic default essentials layout. Now what you have here, you've got your art space in the middle, and on the right hand side you've got all these different panels and windows, and you've got your tools down the left hand side. Now the panels on the right, each one has got different tabs showing different items and windows. I'm just going to get rid of this library one because I don't really use it. It's a CC library. I should probably use it. It's really quite helpful, but for now I'm just going to get rid of it. You can see that there's a menu button here on the right of each of these panels, and I'm going to go down, and you can either click close because there's just one tab, or close tab group if there were more tabs there, and you see that just shifts it across. I can move these panels. If you hover over the edges you can just move them larger or smaller, however you like. So if you get lost and you can't find a window that you're looking for, just make sure that you flick through all the tabs. They've got the names at the top, and the highlighted one is the one that's active. When you do open the panel, you'll see a whole load of menu items, but down the bottom on each one you've got the panel options, you've got close and the close tab group. So the panel options will just bring up options for that particular panel. I'm going to open up two more windows, so if you go to the window menu, you can see all of these items down here are possible windows that you can open. We've already got swatches, properties and layers open, and if you have a look over on the right you can see that there are a few more that are showing, but they're not ticked on here. Next to the layers you've got channels and paths, and you can see on here on the list they're not ticked. If I was to highlight, say, channels and go back to windows, then it will show channels. So sometimes you will have extra windows open, but just because they're not the selected tab then you may not see them. We're going to open the brush window, and that's going to put it in this column here. I want to move that, I don't want to put it there, so I'm going to drag it, and see the blue outlines? That means I'm going to add it to this tab group, properties and adjustments. So I've got my brush set there. And you can see when I opened the brush window, it opened the brush presets as well. I'm just going to leave that where it is. There's an arrow at the top, so you can expand those, or if you wanted, I could move that brush window and see how the blue line is there that will open it up in a third column. So you can rearrange these however you like. So I'm just going to put the brush one back in there. So as you move it around, you will see these blue outlines. If you see it as a line, it will add it in between two panel options. If you see it as a full circle of blue, it will add it to that panel. I'm just going to reduce that one. I'm also going to open up the character one, and that shows you characters like letters for text, and it also brings up the paragraph tab as well. I'm just going to leave them where they are for now because we won't be using them in this tutorial. Once you've got your workspace set up the way you want it, go up to Window, Workspace, and then click on New Workspace and give your workspace a new name. I'm going to call it Test and click Save, and go back up and you can see it's at the top there. You can also choose different workspaces that Photoshop has supplied for you depending on what you're working on. So if we were doing graphic and web, you can see it changes slightly, all the different windows. If I go and choose photography, it changes the panels again. So then I can actually go back to what I had before because I've saved it. If you want to delete your workspace, you need to choose something else first and then go down to Delete Workspace. It will give you a choice of which ones you want to delete. If you're on the workspace that you want to delete, it will just be grayed out and you won't be able to. So I'm just going to delete this test workspace. Coming down on the right to the Layers panel, this is one of the most important panels that you'll see. Photoshop works with layers, so you can draw on one layer and then you can draw on another layer and then you can draw on another layer, and they are independent of each other. You can turn them on and off so that you can't see them, or you can merge them together. I'm going to be going over the Layers panel in a lot more detail in future episodes, so for now this is all you'll need to know just to get started. One other small thing I'll show you is, you can see here this is a thumbnail image of your whole document. If you want to change the size of that thumbnail, go to Panel Options and you can choose the thumbnail size just there. I always check the layer bounds box as well, so that will show you when you've got a sketch on your page, it will fill the whole entire box rather than showing it as the full document, so you can easily see what you've got on each layer. This grey and white checkered pattern means it is a transparent layer. So whenever you draw on this layer and then you save this picture, you will only see your drawing, you won't see any background because there is no background, it's transparent. So on the Layers panel, you've got 3 rows of items. I'm just going to click on the layer and that means it's active and selected. So you can see the 3 rows here. I'm not going to go into too much detail on those now, but I just wanted to point out that they're there. Also at the bottom of the Layers panel, you've got some items down there as well. If you look at the 2 on the right hand side, you've got a little trash can, which you currently can't click on because we can't throw away one layer. You have to have at least one layer in Photoshop. And next to that is the New Layer tab. If you hover over it, the tooltip will come up, so that says Create New Layer. There are many other ways to create new layers. You can go up to Layer, New, Layer, and the keyboard shortcut for that is Shift-Control-N. So I'm just going to click on that, and now we have 2 layers. It's as easy as that. And now you can see the trash can is highlighted, so we can delete one of them. I'm just going to delete Layer 2. Yes, because we don't need it. You can also delete a layer in another way. If you go up to Layer, and then you select Delete, Delete Layer. Over on the left hand side you've got your tools. Now you can expand this so that they bunch up, or you can have it in one long row. The one at the top is the Move tool, and this is the most important one you'll ever see, and you can see the shortcut for that is V. I'm not going to go through every single tool, I'll do that in a future episode, but I am going to tell you about the Brush tool, and as you can see when I select it, the brush panel on the right hand side becomes active. And again, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because I will be covering the brush tool a lot more in future episodes. Further down on the tools near the bottom you have got your foreground and background color. If I click on the small ones on the left, it says default foreground and background colors, and the keyboard shortcut for that is D. That resets the colors to black and white. Those little arrows next to it will swap them over so that your foreground becomes your background, but I'm going to leave it as black and white. The shortcut for switching the foreground and background colors is X, and this is going to be a really useful shortcut for sketching. Going up again on the tools, I'm just going to stop at the Paint Bucket tool. You can select that with the keyboard shortcut G, and I can see that my foreground color is black. I'm going to switch that to white, and I'm going to click on the layer, and that is going to fill the whole page with white. Another way to do this is we could have opened our document with a white background color to start with, but I wanted to open it with a transparent color just so that I could show you what it looked like. So we're going to be sketching with a white background color. Just going back to the Layers panel, I'm going to double click on the word Layer 1, and I'm going to change the name of the layer to Sketch. Then I'm going to select the Brush tool. Now we're not going to be using the panel on the right, but we will be using the panel of tools at the top. You'll find that when you select a tool on the left hand side, there's a row of items at the top. We're going to be looking at the second from the left. If I click on this drop down menu, you'll see I have got a lot of brushes in my set. I'm actually going to go up to this little settings gear cog, and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to reset brushes. It says it's going to replace my brushes with the default ones. I'm going to do that. So that deletes all my brushes and just gives me the default set ones. Going up to that cog again, I'm going to load some basic brushes. So you can see down here there's a whole load. Some of these ones at the bottom I have actually added to Photoshop, so you may not see them. So I'm going to add basic brushes. That is going to change what's there. You can see at the top here you've got some options. You can change the size with this slider. You can change the hardness, which will give a feathered edge or a hard edge. You can also type in the boxes for specific numbers. So I'm just going to choose any size and then hit the arrow to close that up again. Just going across, I'm going to make sure that my opacity for the brush is at 100 and the flow is at 100 as well. These may already be at 100 for you. I've been using Photoshop for other things, so possible it was set previously. Now when using the brush tool, it is much easier to actually draw in Photoshop if you're using a pen with the pen display. You can sketch with a mouse if you like. I would find it quite difficult myself, but the thing about using a pen is that you get the pressure sensitivity, so you can make the size smaller or larger just by pressing harder or softer. Now again, at the top of this toolbar here you've got couple of options. This one here is always use pressure for opacity. When off, the brush preset controls pressure. So if I have this checked, that means that the pressure I use with this pen is going to change the opacity of what I'm drawing. Now if I go across to this one on the end, that says always use pressure for size. When it's off, the brush preset controls pressure. So this one's really important to have on if you want to vary the size of your brush stroke. I'm going to leave that checked. I'm going to uncheck the opacity one because I'm just going to be sketching at 100% opacity. So if I draw something on the screen, you're not going to see anything, because if you go back to my color palette, you can see my foreground color is white. So I'm drawing white on white. So I'm going to switch that over to black, and then I'm going to draw on the screen. And you can see if I draw lightly, it's a much thinner line. If I press harder, it's a much thicker line. This is quite a thin brush size, so I'm going to increase the size. I can either go up to this menu again and use the slider to control the size, or I can use the shortcut on my keyboard, which is the square bracket. So if I use the right bracket, I can make it go larger. If I use the left bracket, it goes smaller. So if I use a bit of a larger brush, then you should be able to see the size difference. Another thing to point out with these basic brushes, you can see that this line actually looks a little bit bumpy. So going over to our brush panel over here, there's one thing that I should point out. If you've got the brush tip shape menu item selected, you'll see at the bottom here there's a section called spacing, and it's not quite at the end. So I'm just going to slide that, well, if I slide it up, you can see the spacing changes in the preview just below. So I'm going to slide it all the way down, and again, if I draw again, that's a really smooth line. And I can draw it thicker or thinner. So now I've got a mess on my screen, I need to delete some of this. You can choose the eraser tool, which is just over here above your paint bucket tool, and the keyboard shortcut for that is E. Again, at the top you've got a row of tools that pertain only to the eraser tool. So with this arrow drop down, I can choose a different brush shape for the eraser. Also, the mode, I can change it to be either a brush, or I can change it to be either a pencil, or I can change it to be a block. I'm going to leave it at a block. So I'm going to use the eraser to erase some of my lines. As you can see, it's erasing the black and the white background, so I'm going to undo. This is also one of the most important keys you'll use. The undo button can be found under Edit. You can either do Undo State Change, which is Ctrl Z, or more useful is the Step Backward tool, which is Alt Ctrl Z. Now with the Step Backward tool, what it's going to do is Photoshop remembers quite a few different things that you do one after another, and that's called your history. If you go over to the Windows tab, you can go down and you can see the history window. If we open that up, and I'm just going to extend that a bit, you can see everything that I've been doing in Photoshop. So if I was to do Ctrl+Alt+Z now, we would undo some of what we've done. If I just keep going, you can see stuff undoing. So of course that's one way you can erase things. But going back here with the eraser, We don't want to erase the background, so I'm going to undo that. Another way that you can do it is just to paint over what you've drawn with the background color. So this is where it becomes helpful to switch over your foreground and background color using the X keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to go back to my brush tool. I'm on black at the moment, so if I draw something, it's going to draw a line. If I press X, now I'm drawing in white, and it's just like I'm erasing. The benefit of doing it this way rather than using your eraser tool is, for one, you're not erasing the background. Two, you are using the brush tool for both, so you're going to have the same preset effects on your stroke. And the third option is it's so easy, you just got to press X just to switch over. Because if I press X again, then I'm drawing. I press X, then I'm erasing. If I press X, then I'm drawing. X, I'm erasing. And it's as easy as that. And if you're using a pen, you can set one of the buttons up as the X shortcut, so you don't even have to use your left hand to press X. You just draw, press your key, draw. I haven't actually got it set up at the moment, but you get what I mean. So I'm just going to erase everything on my screen because it looks a little bit messy. So with the brush tool, I touched on the opacity for a moment. So let's go back and change that from 100% down to 50%, and let's see what it looks like. As you can see, it comes out grey because it's 50% of black. And when I cross over my lines, it adds up. So you need to take into consideration, if you're using opacity, it's going to build up as you go over and over and over. So if I go back up to the toolbar and I select the button that changes the opacity depending on the pressure sensitivity of the pen, then you can see that it makes a really lovely gradient effect on the opacity when you draw. The harder I press, the darker it gets. And if I want to draw really lightly, then I just do very light, soft strokes. You can still see that it does add up when you draw over it, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, it's definitely a really good option if you want to change the opacity on the brush as you're drawing. Another option is to change the opacity across the whole layer, and obviously that's controlled down in the layer panel. So if I just draw something on the screen so that we've got something, and you can see I've got the opacity still turned on, but I want to turn down the whole layer. You can just adjust this slider and you can see that the whole lot changes. And it is going to change the background as well because that's part of the layer, but that's no problem. But it is something to consider. The good thing about using the layer to change the opacity is you can do it at any time, and if you change your mind you can just put it back up to 100. If you're using opacity on the brush, you need to set it before you use the brush, and you can't go back and change it once you've already made a stroke. So if I'm drawing something and I've got it sort of medium, and then I want to turn the opacity right down, I draw something and it's lighter again, but I want to change those lines. I want them to be fully opaque. There's no way I can go back and do that. I have to actually change it to fully opaque, and then I have to redraw them. So that's something to consider with opacity. So what if you want to sketch with a different colour other than black and white? You can change the colour of your foreground or background just by clicking on them. It'll bring up this colour picker window, and you can choose any colour you like. And you will see at the top here where it says new, this is the colour that you're choosing. So I sometimes sketch with blue because it kind of represents non-photo blue. It's just a colour that I choose to use that is different to black, because when I actually go over and do the final lines in black, then my sketch is a different colour, so it's really helpful to do your sketching in anything other than black. So I tend to use blue. If I'm doing a really complex sketch which has multiple layers, I might choose a different colour for each layer just so that I know where I'm at and what I'm doing, just to keep myself organised. You can also choose a different colour using the swatches tab up here. If you select on any of these colours, it will change your foreground colour. You can click on the colour tab as well, and you can select colours like that as well. If you choose a colour that you want to come back to again and again, you can choose it on this colour panel, then go across to your swatches. At the bottom of the swatches panel is this button here next to the trash button. If you click on that, that will create a new swatch. You can give it a name, you can add it to your library, just click OK, and if you see there, it is being added to your swatch panel. So that's a way that you can collect colours that you really want to come back to. And to reselect it, you just click on it. So once you've done your awesome sketch, the next step is to prepare it so that you can ink over the top of it. I would turn the opacity down on the actual layer. You can actually type in there as well if you can't get it directly on 50%. it's not really relevant what number you choose. And then I'm going to put a new layer on top, and I'm going to call this black ink, and that's the layer that I'm going to be inking on. I'm going to change my colors back to black. I could have pressed D on the keyboard for the shortcut for that, and then I can just draw on top of the sketch. I can still see my sketch below. Beautiful. And it's as easy as that. And if I press the I button next to each layer, you can turn each one on and off. So I can turn my sketch off and I can see my finished piece there. It's an absolute masterpiece. Normally it would look better than that, but I don't really have the time to do a proper finished piece for this tutorial. Sometimes when I'm inking, it makes it helpful if you lock your layer, and this means that you can't accidentally select it and start drawing on that one. So to do that, you make your layer active, and there's a little padlock button, so you just click on that. So now my sketch layer is locked and I can't draw on it or move it. It just says I cannot use the brush tool because it's locked. I can still turn it on and off so I can see it or not see it, but it's just something very helpful to do that, because sometimes you'll find you've got your sketch layer and then you want to start inking on it and you start doing it on top of your sketch layer, and then it's really difficult to separate them. So this just helps keep your artwork really organized and separated. A few more tips to help you with your workflow. If you've got a scrolling wheel on your mouse, which should look like that, you can hold down the Alt button, and if you scroll up and down, you can zoom in and out. You can also go up to your magnifying tool, which is here, and the keyboard shortcut for that is Z. Click and drag, it will zoom in. And again, you've got your toolbar at the top. You can click 100%, which will zoom it in to 100%, or you can fit it on the screen, which will fit it in, or you can click on fill the screen, which will fill the screen. It's fairly self-explanatory, those three. So lastly, I'm going to show you how to save your work. If you go up to File and Save As, I'm just going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to save this file as Photoshop Sketch 1. It's a .psd, which is a Photoshop file, but you can also save it as a different kind of document. But for now, we're just going to save it as a Photoshop file. And this is the one that you will always go back to when you open up your piece and you want to keep working on it. So just click Save. It's going to bring up this format option window. You can just press OK on that, and that's it, it's saved. You can see the name of your document just here on the tab. And one last thing to mention, if I was to open another new document, and I'm going to choose the same type that we've got already. I've got a new document open, and you can see there's two tabs now with two different documents. If you want to see them both, you can go up to Window and Arrange, and there's all different ways that you can display these. So if I do two up vertical, you can see them side by side, and whichever one you click on is highlighted, and you work on that, and all the panels change depending on which one you're working on. If you want to go back to how it was before, you go Windows, Arrange, consolidate all the tabs, and then it's back to the tabbed view. And you can switch between however many documents. You can have hundreds open if you want. So that's it for the tutorial for today. It is very basic, and I hope that I covered enough for you to at least get started with sketching. I'm going to be coming out with a whole range of Photoshop tutorials based on lots of different sections on Photoshop. It is such a huge program, there is so much to cover, so I really hope that this was helpful to begin with. Like I said before, if there's anything you want me to elaborate on with this tutorial, please drop a comment in the comments below. So thanks very much for watching, give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you in the next episode.